Episode 12 is brought to you by the following Big Dog tier members: Melissa Wilson, Charlie McRoby, Cheyenne Pettiford, Lynette Smith, and Brianna Newton. Are you looking to be more involved in the Dog Pound community? If so, please visit patreon.com/dogwithabone. For just $1 a month, you can help support Dog with a Bone's mission. Please visit our page to learn about the multiple tiers that will give you access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, documents, photos, videos, and live monthly events with me. I thank you for your continued support and consideration. Warning: this episode contains adult content and listener discretion is advised. All views and opinions expressed by Dog with a Bone guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the contributors. Everyone, and welcome back to Dog with a Bone. If you have not already, please join our Dog with a Bone discussion Facebook page where you can meet other listeners and discuss the episodes as we move through the season. There will be a ton to talk about. Also, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to Dog with a Bone on Spotify or wherever you listen so you get notified when episodes are released. In the last episode, we heard from Kelly, the hotel manager, on what Marianne and Kenny were doing just a few hours after leaving the scene of the tragic death of Mackenzie. They were partying in the pool and drinking as if they were on vacation, while Mackenzie was being sent to Montgomery County Coroner's Office for an autopsy. Marianne and Kenny then took a celebration trip to Myrtle Beach, just 2 days after Mackenzie was buried. You might even be wondering, what investigation did the sheriff's office even do? Remember, by the time that Marianne and Kenny went on vacation, the sheriff had known that this was not an accident, but an arson. Here's what we know. Kenny gave a statement that you heard in the previous episode at the scene of the fire. Kenny was then given a lie detector test at some point on April 27th, but there is no timestamp on the report. Marianne and Donald were also given a lie detector test and both passed. William, on the other hand, showed signs of deception twice regarding the fire. I had asked Donald what happened when he took his test at the Bureau of Criminal Investigations office.
When I talked to that woman that did the lie detector test, she told me, because Marianne, they're smart, you know what I'm saying? They got law enforcement helping them. And if you're on any kind of like pills, if you take some pills or anything like that, you can pass a lie detector test. But also, if you're a narcissist where you lie constantly, you can pass a lie detector test.
I did some research and discovered that individuals who have narcissistic qualities can pass a lie detector test due to being self-assured and the ability to manipulate psychological responses. Typically, they do not show any psychological changes when lying, which makes it very difficult for those who are reading the test to interpret. One main reason is that a narcissist lacks a conscience and doesn't feel remorse for lying. Does this sound like Kenny or Marianne to anyone? Someone who is narcissistic tries to charm or persuade the operator to convince them that they're not lying. We know that lie detector tests are not admissible in court, but rather a tool. Lie detectors in and of itself cannot be the sole tool, but need to be considered with the rest of the evidence, physical and circumstantial. Let me read what the report says. Quote, "No specific reactions indicative of deception appeared on the subject's charts as a result of relevant questions asked during the examination. It is to be considered, therefore, that this person told the substantial truth during the test, end quote. This was the statement or the result that was listed on Kenny's, Marianne, and Donald's lie detector test. Marianne's lie detector test was not until May 11th at BCI in London, Ohio. Donald took his lie detector test on May 19th. Why did they wait so long to do Marianne's test, since we know that she was also at the home with Kenny and by all actions was not a distraught mother who was hospitalized? Let's review William's test. William was given a lie detector twice, once on May 17th and the other one just 5 days later on May 22nd. Both of these tests, William had showed signs of deception. On the report, there were some pre-test information that was given to all individuals who took the test. For Williams, it says, quote, Potter denied ever doing anything to start Marianne's house fire and denied starting Marianne's house fire. Potter also denied ever seeing Marianne's house fire start. Potter denied knowing Marianne's house burned before Jeremy, his brother, had woken him up. The recorded tracing as appearing on this person's charts are of a nature not susceptible to accurate interpretation. An inconclusive finding must be offered in this report, end quote. I asked about a follow-up about William's lie detector test after the fire. Just a heads up, everyone, he says, there wasn't more to go on. What about William failing the lie detector test?
He didn't fail.
He didn't fail?
So you're jumping in. You're jumping too far. But he did not fail.
I thought the test results said he failed.
The two questions, I don't think they categorized it as a failure, but as deception. I'm not an expert in that, but it wasn't like he lied. He just, I don't remember the terminology they use for that, but there are some of the texts that absolutely know they're lying when you take one of these detector tests, but his was maybe a deception or something. There was something more there that they couldn't break. So it's not like he failed the test. He didn't let say pass, but he didn't fail.
So what would you normally do in these situations to follow up with him on that night? With William, we know he's being deceitful.
They have ways to talk to him. He was interviewed, and that was then. But there wasn't enough to say, okay, yeah, he's lying for certain about the fire, or he is lying about this or that. That was nothing that they could actually either have on it.
How is there nothing more that you can go on? He showed deception twice on the lie detector test about the fire. He was in the home the night of the fire. And you can't tell me you have nothing more to go on? Do you all remember when I first started this case, I had asked about Ashley Baker. I asked if anyone could reach her, as I have tried multiple times with no success. The reason I wanted to get a hold of her was she was William's girlfriend at the time of the murder. William had said that he was with her at her house. The tape Donald had of his conversation with Ashley, she was saying that this was not correct. Somehow it got ruined when Donald got it back from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. Crazy how a whole tape just becomes unraveled and the screws are taken out, but the other tapes are all just fine. But I have to say, thank heavens for Facebook Messenger, because Donald logged back into Facebook and entered Ashley's name, and their whole previous conversation loaded right back up for us. I read the messages, and Ashley admits that she was interrogated on 2 different occasions about William. Not only was she interrogated 2 times, but they put her in the back of a squad car and drove her to the sheriff's office. Now, why are we putting somebody in the back of a squad car who isn't a suspect instead of just having her drive herself to the station to take a statement or let her parents or a friend bring her? Sounds like they were treating her more as a suspect or intimidating her than they ever treated Marianne, Kenny, and William. Did they ever pick those 3 up and put them in the back of a squad car and bring them in for an interview? My guess is no. Ashley tells Donald that they were only, and I say this word, only asking questions about William. William provided a statement, and his alibi is saying that he was with Ashley the night of the fire. But Ashley is saying that this isn't true. Ashley says she assumed William was at home, but has no way of knowing if that's true. William has no alibi, everyone. Zero. He has no alibi, and he's lying about where he was. Why do we have to lie? He says he was with Ashley. Ashley's saying, nope, he wasn't with me. William and Kenny had told Cheryl that William was there the night of the fire and moved the truck. But once that fire started, William vanished. He didn't even come out of the house to help with the fire. He said he was sleeping in bed when his brother Jeremy came and woke him up. And he failed that specific question on the lie detector test. Remember Tanya? She did not see William running out of that house. So this makes zero sense to me that he says they didn't have enough to go on. You have plenty. You have him, let's use Vernon's word, being deceitful, on the lie detector twice. He has no alibi. He lied about his alibi. Cheryl and her husband having interactions with William the next day about the fire. William riding his bike up and down the neighborhood the next day asking everyone about the fire and if you could tell what accelerant was used in a fire. And yet, Vernon claims that they had nothing more to go on. This sounds like a lot to me. And it wasn't until Donald shared more of what he was told about the fire marshals being asked to, quote, step outside the box, end quote, when they started closing in on William.
The woman that does the lie detector test, me and her went outside, a BCI outside, and we were talking, and she said, Donald, I'm going to tell you right now. She said, it killed me to give you that lie detector test. And we started talking, and she said, I knew you was nothing with you. And she said, I said, well, the sheriff says he ain't got no suspect. And she looked at me and she said, he's a liar. And I know what she was talking about, William, the one that failed the lie detector test twice. She said, he's a liar. So when I talked to the fire marshal, he told me the same thing. He said, Donald, I'm going to tell you right now, we brought William in. We started questioning him. And then something happened. Something happened that was the end of it. And he said that they were supposed to bring William back, to question him again, a second interview. And that's when the fire marshal got pushed out of the case. And he said, but I got shoved out, and I never got the opportunity to bring him in another interview.
Shoved out? Why would the fire marshal, who is doing what they should in regards to the investigation, be asked to step out of the box? And then what? There's no more further follow-up with William? Because he moves. Since there was no follow-up on William's lie detector test, was there any follow-up on Marianne and her ever-changing stories? Marianne also claims that this was an accident. Vernon and I continue our conversation, and this picks up right after he tells me that my question was a Donald question when I asked if Marianne was calling in for updates on the case.
He put that question there because that's part of the thing. He wants to make sure that she's perceived to be guilty, even though we can't make her guilty, any more guilty than what she is or isn't. He doesn't want that. He wants her to be guilty. And why isn't she asking questions? Why isn't she doing the same thing he's doing? And every death that I've ever been involved in the last 40 years of the parents, even if they're together, they still handle the death differently.
Handling a death differently, I can completely understand. I have worked in hospice for over 20 years, but her actions and accounts of that night is not about handling death a different way. It's about covering your ass and trying to get away with a crime. Think about this, everyone. Really. Does he really think that Marianne didn't do this and that she would not be worried about someone coming back to try and kill her again? This is how insane his statement is, that she is just handling this differently and feels that it's an accident. Donald wasn't the one that someone tried to kill, and yet he is asking more questions and pushing this investigation than the people that were in the home that night.
This is different. Marianne has answered every question we've ever asked her. She's come in whenever we ask her to come in.
I'm just curious how many times the sheriff's office actually interviewed Marianne, because Donald has been brought in or questioned about 19 times, he says. Every time there's a new detective or someone looking in the case, they call Donald and want to interview him and bring him in and talk to him. And he always asks them, have you talked to Marianne? Have you talked to the mom? And most of the time, the answer is no, they haven't. Wouldn't this be a red flag?
She's never resisted or said, no, I'm not going to now. But she has come to rest within her mind that this is not a murder, that her daughter died from an accidental death. She doesn't have any more answers than anybody else.
I disagree. Marianne has more answers than anyone else, given she was in that home. You need to press her for answers. It's called interrogation.
But in her mind, this is not a homicide. This is her daughter died, and she mourns her daughter's death. Not the same way Donald mourns the kid's death, but Marianne mourns her in her own way. And that's not acceptable to Donald. They have different reactions.
This is not acceptable to anyone, and we are not even law enforcement. I don't know of one person or mother who would mourn their child by partying and playing in a pool and going on vacation 2 days after their child was buried. Going back to that, and these are my questions. These are absolutely my questions, not Donald's. My question was, just in general, when your daughter's case has been deemed a murder, she can think that it was an accident. But you're saying because she thinks that this wasn't a murder, that's why she's not calling in to ask for any updates on who set the fire?
Like I said, we've had, every time we've talked to her, she's been satisfied with whatever answer we were trying to get from her.
Of course she's satisfied, Vernon. She's satisfied with the answers that you give her because you're not doing your job. Believe me, she is more than satisfied with your answers and your investigation. I circle back with Vernon on the sexual assault investigation again because I feel that these are two separate crimes. I asked him if a lie detector test was ever given regarding the sexual assault.
I don't know if I can answer that specifically without looking at what questions were asked.
That would be a no, everyone. He knows they didn't. Since Marianne and Kenny didn't do a lie detector on the sexual assault, what about William's lie detector? From the start of this investigation, I truly believe that this was two separate crimes. The sexual assault happened and the fire to cover it up. I wanted to know if Vernon also thought the same thing.
That was one of our perspectives as well. Are they even connected? The only connection would be Mackenzie. But do we have, and we thought, and that was one of the things Dr. Gay was, okay, we know that she left school, she walked home, but was she sexually assaulted on the way home? Well, that would mean that she had semen as an 8-year-old who's not sexually active. What 8-year-old is, but so she's been sexually assaulted under the bridge, because there's a bridge right beside the old schoolhouse where she went to school, and she was sexually assaulted. They anally raped her, they vaginally raped her, they orally raped her, and she walked home unscathed, saw mom and spent the evening with mom and went to bed, and she left school at 3 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, the house was on fire. So from 3 o'clock to 1 o'clock, she doesn't urinate, she doesn't drink.
Doesn't that close your time frame, though?
If you think that that semen was deposited, it would have had to have been deposited at the house, not on the way home from school. But that was one of the things we looked at. Could she have been more likely assaulted on the way home? And we thought maybe one of the school kids, because she ran with some of the older kids. She was 8. She ran with 12-year-olds. They would come home. They were neighbors and so forth, and they would walk. This group would walk home because it wasn't that far. For a little girl, it would have been far. But in reality, it's not that far from school to where her house was. And that's one of the things that John looked at with Dr. Gay. Dr. Gay says it's possible a 12-year-old could be producing semen.
And would that cause any damage as a 12-year-old?
That depends on what damage you're talking about as a 12-year-old.
Well, I don't know.
But still, a 12-year-old's penis is bigger than an 8-year-old's vagina. Even with that, if they looked at that speculation that, just say a 12-year-old, more than likely a 12-year-old, because somebody getting to 13, 14, you're really maturing. Your body's changing significantly at that point. The penis is larger now than what it was when you were 10, but by the time you're 12 in that kind of age group, it's now significantly larger. As soon as you hit puberty, it starts to enlarge. And because you're producing semen. But would he have enough to produce enough semen to put in 3 different orifices in one episode? Even as adults, that wouldn't happen that often. Yeah, most sexual assaults would not, in one incident, would not create, would not invade all 3 orifices.
Was it the same DNA in all 3 orifices?
Well, I think so. I am trying to remember what they were showing with each one of them, but I think all 3 of them had DNA on them.
The same markers. So did you answer my question? I'm just going to ask you again. I don't remember your answer. Where can I get the DNA from if I want to do genealogy?
We're going to find out where it's at in the case file. Then we'll see what it would take to compare what you'd have to have, whether it's just the DNA report. Is that all they're going to need? Because we're not going to have a DNA sample. We might be able to have the swabs to retest whatever that report shows.
Did you all catch that? If not, let me break it down. Vernon just told me how it would be difficult for one adult male to produce that amount of semen to be found in all 3 places. But now is telling me that it's the same markers in all 3 areas? How can that even be? Do we have more than one male involved? As we continued to talk about the case, I was curious about the events of when Vernon and his deputies notified Donald during their investigation that Mackenzie had died.
We went over and told Donald. Donald's across the street from the hospital and worked at the bar, which he didn't tell us that he had been fired. And he was already, at one time, he was on his way out to the fire and turned around and came back. And at that point, we didn't know that he already knew that she was in the fire and dead. We had no knowledge that he already knew, and he didn't tell us. So once again, if Kenny and Marianne could lie, Donald was deceptive as well. We didn't know at that point that he already knew and already talked to Marianne, and that he'd already started towards Jeffersonville, but decided to come back. And when he came back, went to the hospital and went to the bar.
Let me clarify here that Donald did not hear from Marianne about Mackenzie dying. Remember, when Marianne called Donald, she had told Donald that Mackenzie was still in the house, and Donald said, "Go save our baby girl." Donald actually heard that Mackenzie had died from the dispatcher who told him over the phone. And that's where you met him?
I don't know if I knew that's where he worked, but one of the city police officers knew him and said, he's a bouncer at the bar over here, and let's go there and see if we can find him. And that officer, the city police officer, and I went over and notified him, and we thought we were telling him fresh. Later, he knew it all. He just waited for us to come tell him. But by this time, I told him Mackenzie was they were already taking Mackenzie. So we got to the hospital. We did cursory viewing of her body, and then went over and told Donald. But I know when I told Donald, she was already being transported to the morgue.
Why would you not notify the father before moving Mackenzie from the hospital to the coroner's office? Donald should have the opportunity to see Mackenzie at the hospital before anything else moved forward, instead of just being told to go home. But it sounds like that was not even an option, according to Vernon. Another part of this investigation that I wanted to hear more about from Vernon was why Kenny said he attempted to save her.
We know. He admits it didn't happen.
Oh, he admits it. It didn't happen. So he changed his story.
We thought this didn't happen. We went back out there and looked in the ladder. There was a ladder there, but there was no brick ladder. And we know that the fireman that rescued, that went up to the bedroom to get her out, broke the window to get out. Kenny's saying he broke the window. The fireman said, I broke the window to get her out of there, and there was too much smoke to get in. And Kenny probably couldn't, if he had broken, he probably couldn't have got in. Smoke would have pushed him back out, but Kenny had to be the hero, and he's always told everybody he was a firefighter.
Is he?
No, he did belong to a fire department.
He did?
So did Donald.
Always back to Donald.
You know, you get these guys that wanted to be firemen and never made it beyond showing up for Saturday orientation.
So he wasn't actively working as a fireman?
He was never a certified firefighter. He may have belonged to a fire department at one time, but he never fought a fire. He never had any more training than saying, okay, put that hose on the back of that truck, roll that hose up. And he just didn't like that being told what to do type of thing, and didn't want to go through he didn't realize he had to go to school to be a fireman, have classes to be a fireman. And when that came up, and he said, I don't want to do that. But he would always tell everybody he was a fireman.
Well, that's what I was hearing from people, is he was saying he was, but then there was issues with that.
That was that issue. He embellished his experience as a firefighter he never had again. Now, Donald was also a volunteer firefighter that probably never fought a fire, never did anything, never got any more beyond other than just showing up on a Saturday class. But that's no foul, because he never bragged to say, I'm a firefighter.
Right? Or I tried to save her.
He never made any embellishments. Kenny made the embellishment that I fought my way through. I put the ladder up there, climbed up there, fought the fire, broke the window, reached and tried, couldn't find her, and heavy smoke coming back. And I go, no, that didn't happen. And when we pushed him on it, he said, okay, I had to tell this because everybody wanted to know why I didn't try to save her. I tried to save her, but I didn't climb the ladder. I didn't try to get her out of the bedroom, but he got caught.
This is where I would have pressed Kenny more and not chalk this up to him trying to save face as to why he didn't try to save her. Just think about this. Of everything you've heard about Kenny and his personality, do you think if he was not responsible for setting this fire, that he would have attempted to save her, to be this hero to everyone, to be this big badass guy who at least tried? I 1,000% do think that he would have. I have no doubt in my mind that he is narcissistic, and any chance that he can pretend to be something that he's not, he jumps on it. But this is a different situation. He needed a story on why he didn't try to save her, because he never tried. This was not a save face, but a deliberate lie. Vernon and I talked more about who is responsible for this fire and sexual assault. Somehow, again, he turns this back to Donald, who has been already cleared. Marianne, Kenny, and William have not, and yet he does not focus on their actions or lack of.
That's kind of what we have at this point. It is a lot. It is a tragedy all in and of itself. All the other things come out, create the complexities here, the domestic situation, the hatred between each other. Golly, the people that get divorced and don't like each other. This is a hatred. I mean, a deep and rooted hatred.
Well, he has an alibi. He wasn't there.
Well, by his standards.
The bar? Didn't they say he was working?
He quit, he was fired, and left the bar. And he went towards, when he found out about the fire, he was at home. allegedly. Marianne called him and said, hey, the house was on fire.
Right.
Allegedly.
What did she say? I'm referring to Kim, Donald's ex-wife, who he was with at the time of the call.
I don't recall what she said, but he went towards Jeffersonville. Changed his mind, I'm going to go back. Why did he go? Why didn't he come to the sheriff's office? I think he didn't have enough gas to get to Jeffersonville, whatever it was. If it was my daughter, I would have gotten out and walked to Jeffersonville. Nothing would have stopped me from going to my daughter. If I had to crawl, I would have got there. Donald didn't. He came back to town, and went back to the bar, like these tools, because he was the handyman bouncer, and kind of waited to see if we were going to talk to him. I think he did call the office and said, can you tell me what's going on? We didn't know. I didn't talk to him.
Can you believe this, everyone? He is questioning Donald's actions, that he would have walked to the fire. Marianne didn't even try to save Mackenzie. She strolled from house to house. She didn't use the cell phone in their truck. She didn't run to the fire station, but you're questioning Donald. Marianne has changed her story 100 times, and yet, if this does not show you the bias and unprofessionalism of the sheriff, who is still questioning the father of a victim 19 years later and has been cleared, and yet he can't even offer up the same doubts and questions of Marianne, Kenny, and William, screams foul play. So I asked Vernon about the changing stories for Marianne and Kenny and escaping the house, and he waved that off. He claimed that that's not enough to do anything. They lied, they changed their story. But questions why, again, Donald didn't walk to the fire? He had 2 young boys at home in the middle of the night and hardly had any gas in his truck. He was not at the scene sitting on the porch like Marianne or playing fetch with the dog as Kenny was, but okay, yeah, let's focus on Donald. But we're not done yet, everyone. What is important to note here is that Donald didn't need a court order to get his DNA, unlike William, who has more motivation.
And I don't know if it was his cell phone or his girlfriend's cell phone, because they were apparently in bed after getting fired. You have to have sex. Apparently, you could shoot holes in that. A good prosecutor or defense attorney for her, because, well, why aren't you looking at him? He had the motivation to make sure she didn't have a house to take his daughter away from her. She didn't have a house. The child can't go somewhere where she doesn't have a house. So I'll burn the house down. If you want to look circumstantial, don't forget to look there, because he had more motivation than anybody else.
I have a hard time believing that any defense attorney or prosecutor could even make an argument on this, because Donald was cleared. The other 3 individuals in the home that night haven't been cleared. We also know Donald has an alibi, and it's not his DNA. I just have to wonder why Vernon continues to throw this back out there. Donald had custody of the kids. He does not have more motivation than anyone else. And to say so is ridiculous. I really can't help think, everyone, that Vernon and Stiegel wanted to pin this on Donald, and still do. They wanted to and continue to make him the focus instead of who they really need to be focusing on. It's the squirrel. Look over here. No, look over here. I pressed Vernon more on the motivation to cover up the sexual assault. We know that Donald was not there and has been cleared. So who gains more from trying to cover up the sexual assault? You don't think that Marianne did and Kenny did if she was being sexually abused?
She was not sexually abused. Obviously, if she had been enduring ongoing sexual abuse in that house, her body would have indicated that she was ongoing, per se.
Here he goes again, claiming that she was not sexually abused. Did he miss Kenny making her kiss him for clothes? Did he miss William making them suck each other's chest? How about the semen found in 3 separate places? she have a bunch of UTIs and a bunch of things going on from her records?
Well, and once again, that would be the speculation. But if she drinks a lot of iced tea, drinks a lot of pop, or what her diet was that created the acidic nature of the UTI, you could make those arguments. But she was not. There was no physical signs that she was sexually abused, emotionally abused. There's no doubt in my mind. Verbally abused, more than likely.
Vernon mentions that there was no sign she was sexually abused, but as always, we do have another individual who was around Mackenzie growing up and was abusive. That would be her Uncle Chris. Take a listen.
One night, Mackenzie woke up, came in my bedroom and said, "Dad, I'm hurting. I need to go to the hospital." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And this is like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "I'm hurting." And she had 2 bruises in her thighs, on her thighs. And she told me that her Uncle Chris did this. I jumped up. I was still in my underwear, my boxers, and I got in my truck and went to go catch this sumbitch. The mom, Marianne, called her dad, which called the police, and then they stopped me when I got to the edge of town, took me to the police station in handcuffs until they could find him. So after all this went down and they found him that he did do this, and he was in the military, and he already left the military without permission. So the military already wanted him anyway. So found out he was playing truth and dare with the kids, with his nephews and his kids, playing truth and dare. And he touched Mackenzie. And when we go to court, the mom drops the charges. He's never been tested. And there's other papers that I have where he was not allowed around Mackenzie at all, ever again. And she would take him when me and her weren't together, and she would have the kids. She took Mackenzie, or Chris would come by, and I caught him, and I turned that in, and nothing. You won't believe the stuff that was turned in that I was totally ignored. Everything, totally ignored.
So if he was in the military, wouldn't they already have his DNA on file?
I don't know.
How many adults do we have now that were around Mackenzie who were sexually, physically, and emotionally abusing her with numerous reports and nothing ever happened? No accountability. Marianne continued to allow her kids to be around Chris, William, Kenny, her dad, and dropped all charges when she could have stopped all of this from happening. The thing that bothers me, and there are many things, let me tell you, is that Vernon sure likes to use the word speculation when there are cold, hard facts showing that this was happening. Listen, Donald has a ton of case reports showing the abuse these kids suffered, and all of them knew about it. He has documents upon documents, photos, and things were actually substantiated. The problem is that everyone turned their head. Now you have a murder, and they are all hiding. What about physically? Do you think she was physically abused?
There was no indication of physical abuse.
Oh, Donald has reports after reports after reports of physical abuse. Let me know if you need some copies, Vernon. In the past, throughout her life?
I don't believe that. I don't remember. I'd have to do some studying on that. There was the speculation that the boys may have been abused, physically abused, or not treated nice, but that was Kenny.
You don't remember and you don't think so?
Kenny, I think as far as I hear, Kenny was to take her back to her dad's, get her back to her dad's, but she wanted to be with her mom. What 8-year-old doesn't want to be with her mom? So she didn't want to be there anymore. Donald just finally got tired of fighting it and let her go. Biggest mistake he would have made, if that's accurate, and that's something he's got to live with.
Which I couldn't even.
But he fought her taking the kids. But I think Mackenzie finally said, let me go stay with mom. And now the boys wanted to go with their sister to go with their mom because they still had a good relationship with their mother at that point. Donald didn't have a relationship with her, and Kenny certainly didn't have a relationship. That was probably the only reason that Marianne didn't fight to get the boys there.
Are you well known with the Potters? Has there been lots of sexual abuse with the Potters?
Allegations.
So there has been at least allegations.
The allegation was that Mr. Potter may have been sexually abusive to the girl, that this was a claim. And I think my guess is Mr. Potter was probably a very abusive man all the way around. Whether sexually abusive, wouldn't take that to the bank, but I think he was an abusive man to Mrs. Potter and all the Potter children.
I'm curious as to how that all plays into all of this, just growing up that way.
But like I said, the sexual assault, I think you're going to have a hard time. We would have had a hard time convincing the jury that it happened because of the way we obtained the evidence, because we got it from tainted. Evidence was tainted. It sat somewhere for 6 years. We didn't have it.
Well, it didn't sit, though. It's just the evidence or just the results. They had the results. They just didn't share them with you.
But that creates a cloud of doubt over everything. Why did we not know about this 6 weeks after the fire instead of 6 years after the fire? And all of a sudden now, because we were saying all along, it's not a sexual assault. Well, Donald, this is not sexual assault. This is not sexual assault. 6 years later, this is a sexual assault. And they say, well, why did you do wrong? We had no control over this. It's not our wrong to fix. We didn't know that this was even, the stuff existed, but yet we get the blame for this.
Because you should have followed up when you didn't hear anything back. This is a Fayette County case, which is what you like to tell everybody else that wants to help. This is still a Fayette County open case. But okay, you didn't do anything about that back then. You can't change that. But what you can do is go back and collect new DNA samples from all of those in the home and more people who need to be tested, like Kenny. How about Stiegel's son to rule out Stiegel? Stiegel boys were often over at Marianne and Kenny's house because they were friends with William. How about Chris West? Since there was not enough markers to be put into CODIS, let's run these individuals again. Once again, we are left with more questions than answers as to why nothing has been done or followed up on in this investigation. This case should have been closed with an arrest within 48 hours. One of the first things that I would have expected a sheriff's office to do once discovering that Mackenzie was sexually assaulted is to start your investigation there. Pick that back up. Press them for answers. There are 3 or 4, if you count Jamie, who were in that home just hours before the fire started. There has been no investigation or a lie detector test given to any of these individuals in that home when semen was found on an 8-year-old. Why? We need to retest the individuals who have not been cleared using the samples from the exhuming. And I want to dig more into the exhuming in the next episode. I want to talk more about what happened when Mackenzie was exhumed, how many markers were obtained, and why in the world did they take Mackenzie to the Jeffersonville Fire Department as the place to collect the DNA. Next time on Dog with a Bone.
I don't, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what they actually were going to test for, but it was not going to be another autopsy. So they didn't have to take her back to the morgue to do a forensic autopsy.
They could have done what they did at the gravesite. Wouldn't that be better than taking her to a fire station? That's a fire station and dirty.
That fire station was not dirty.
Well, just if you're in front of a jury.
Your perception there, it was a sterile. They made that sterile.
They did? Dog with a Bone is hosted by Melissa Sandberg, investigated, produced, and written by Melissa Sandberg. Additional writing by Caitlin Sandberg. Edited by Jason Sandberg. Mixed and mastered by Morrow Mixing and Mastering. Theme music by Alex Yukich. Dog with a Bone is a Sat Squatch production.